Okay, time for the end of Julian's interview with Wisconsin Eye. Topics: local control as well as more on fiscal responsibility. Here we go.
How do we stabilize highway funding? The governor last year, you'll recall, 8-cent boost in our 30.9 cent gas tax, but repeal a minimum markup, which he argued would kind of wipe out that 8-cent boost. Are you ready to raise the gas tax?
No, absolutely not. For the same reason, we can't afford to do it. We cannot penalize people right now.
Okay, I'm going to pause him there, and I completely agree with Julian. We cannot penalize people right now. We're in the middle of COVID. Those who are driving the most are arguably those who make the least, right? They're working in warehouse jobs, Amazon, Pick and Save, whatever it might be. Those of us who are working from home have the option and the flexibility of not driving, which means less gas, which means less gas tax. So imposing a higher gas tax would actually negatively impact those right now who can least afford it, and probably not raise as much money as we actually need. Additionally, going forward, as we have more fuel-efficient vehicles and as we get into electric vehicles, things like a Tesla weighs 10% more than a sedan of comparable size. Well, that's more damage to the roads, that's more wear and tear, and we get zero gas tax, obviously, from the Tesla. So I agree, an increase in the gas tax is really not the way to go. Julian's right.
We need to take a good, hard, long look at our transportation funding. Look, I fully understand that transportation funding is crucial and critical to not just infrastructure, but our economy statewide. We have to take a longer look. We need to take a good look.
Okay, so we need to take a good, long, hard look. Well, he says that a few times throughout this interview. But what he doesn't actually suggest is any ideas. There's no proposals. And I understand that this is an interview, but I have an issue with the fact that he just perpetually says no without any ideas or suggestions. He doesn't want to raise the gas tax. He doesn't want to raise property taxes. He doesn't want municipalities to raise property taxes. He doesn't want to give them control to create their own sales tax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He just says no. And that's kind of the GOP mantra, no. So my suggestion is, quite frankly, I think we are unfortunately going to have to deal with a toll system at some point in time in Wisconsin. Julian's right. We are manufacturing, we are farming, we are long roads across long spaces with not a lot of people in between and an awful lot of stuff going across those roads. That's all wear and tear. We're going to have to figure out a better way to pay for it and maybe a better way to actually create our roads. That's my suggestion.
Hopefully, who my predecessor is, Dave Craig, introduced a sustainable bills, the road to sustainability package in this last session. We need to reevaluate a lot of those bills because I think that's going to put us on the right track in order for funding transportation. But the answer can't just be, we need more money. Give us more money. We can't just throw money at the problem. We need to come up with other solutions.
Okay, I'm going to pull up Dave Craig's press release associated with his proposals. So here we go, and you can pull it up. It's on the wisconsin.gov. And there's different ideas in here. He wants an inspector general for the Department of Transportation that reports to the legislature, which of course is kind of interesting because the Department of Transportation is under the executive branch, and they want an inspector general over in the executive branch reporting back to the legislative branch. Well, that's a clear violation of the separation of powers. Anyway, he wants to give local approval for roundabouts. Yay, I'm sure that they would appreciate that. A couple of other things. I thought this one was particularly interesting. He's proposing a local wheel tax referendum, which would allow taxpayers to approve a local transportation tax to increase their revenue. Julian has said he doesn't want to do that. As a matter of fact, he's even talked about limiting the ability of referendums. So I think there's perhaps a little bit of disconnect between what Dave Craig said and what Julian says.
If a school district, a local government plans a major public works project, should they have to give preference to a Wisconsin company? The reason I ask is a study found in 2015, out-of-state contractors got $72 million in public works contracts, but that more than doubled to 146 by 2018. Local governments have to give a priority to Wisconsin businesses?
I think we have an open and free market for a reason. Competition is good for the market, and that's what we need. We have to protect the taxpayers first, and if we can get a quality project built at a cheaper price, then that's what we have to do. We're shopping just like you and I do. We have to do what is best for the taxpayers. That's what's most responsible.
Okay, I'm going to hit a few points in there. First of all, one of the things that is said a lot, and I disagree with, and I want to emphasize this, is that government, whether state, federal, local, cannot and does not run like a business, nor like a household. So he says in there, the government has to shop just like you and I do. Well, no, that's not the case, because the government has to play both sides. What I mean by that is, if you go grocery shopping and you hit the local Pick and Save, part of your concern is not the profitability of those stores, is not the wages of those employees. That's not part of your, normally, day-to-day routine when you hit the grocery store. That has to be part of the thought process for the government, though. And here's why. It's not just about spending the tax money. Julian's right. If we can get it cheaper, I am all for it as long as the quality is the same. But the distinction is the people that we are paying with that money are Wisconsin residents. So it's staying in-house. So now imagine that grocery store is owned by your kids or your family. And now when you go in there, there's actually some thought process associated with, if I buy the thing that's a little bit more expensive, they're going to make a little bit more money, which turns around and is beneficial for the overall economy. So that's the problem with saying that it's purely about shopping and it's purely about price, is that there is more to it than that from the government standpoint. We have to consider both sides of the equation and what benefit the rest of the state economy receives from that money staying in-house. That said, are there going to be times where we have to go out of state? Absolutely. Where there are services or products that we don't have? Certainly 100%. So do I agree that we should have to mandate that all the projects stay in state? Actually, I don't. So from that standpoint, I agree with Julian. Should it be an 80-20? Should we try to establish something? Certainly. But there needs to be an understanding that even if a project is more expensive to the quote-unquote taxpayers, it may actually benefit the taxpayers overall in that money is staying in the state and being recycled. That's how the economy works for government. Okay, final topic, local control. We all know that the GOP is all about less government, more local control for cities, and fewer regulations. However, what I'm being told by some of the mayors is that's not what they're experiencing. Instead, there are more restrictions being put on them, and some of those restrictions have cost that they're not being reimbursed for. So let me give you a couple of examples. This is Wisconsin's 2017 Act 243, and it deals with housing and property development. It was clearly written by the construction trades for their own benefit. So, for example, this act prohibits cities, villages, and towns from enacting any limits or restrictions on the installation of banners over the height and length of a fence surrounding a construction site. So in other words, a construction company doing work with a fence surrounding it can cover it with whatever banners and advertising they want, regardless of what the city wants. I don't see how that helps Wisconsin citizens. Now, the second one absolutely makes sense, and this restricts the cities, villages, and towns from creating a dwelling code, so a building code, that's more restrictive than the state uniform dwelling code. That makes perfect sense. The last thing you want is to have an electrician that's got to deal with multiple different codes in multiple different cities and villages. Wouldn't make any sense. So, that one I completely agree with. Here's the one that upset one of the mayors, and this is part of it. So this is the Housing Affordability Report. So this report is now mandated by the state, never existed before. And part of the goal of it is to come up with a plan down here at the bottom to reduce the time and cost necessary to approve and develop a new residential subdivision in the municipality by 20%. Okay. First of all, that's utterly preposterous. You're not going to manage to come up with that. So this report is going to be relatively bogus, at least associated with that. But what the mayor was upset about is they still did it. It wasn't part of their plan. It wasn't part of their budget. And it cost them upwards of $10,000. And that was for a relatively small municipality. This is for any city or village that has a population of 10,000 or more. Well, there's quite a few of those in District 28. And so this has cost cities and taxpayers probably upwards of $100,000 just in Senate District 28. And I suspect it's going to be probably every year. So that's why that mayor was particularly upset about it. It was a huge waste of time and of money that they're not being reimbursed for. So the other one that I want to talk about is water. And I don't have anything to pull up on the screen, but I was talking to one of the local mayors, and every city, every municipality has its own water issues, right? We're either getting it from Lake Michigan, from another city, from wells, and of course dealing with water purification because we want clean water. And the PSC has put restrictions on and limitations on or requirements on cities as far as what kind of capabilities their purification plants have to have. And that, in some cases, is now costing millions, if not tens of millions of dollars. And what the PSC did not allow them to do was to start to build that slowly over time. We knew about this for years, but the city wasn't allowed to start to incrementally increase the price of water so that it could pay for that massive renovation. Instead, it all happened at the same time, and in one case, the water bills went up by 40%. Well, you can certainly imagine that the residents of that town were not particularly happy, and who did they take it out on? The local mayor. Well, they didn't have anything to do with it. It was a requirement from the state. And so that's part of the problem, is that there's this idea of local control, of less regulation, of allowing local government to do what they need to do. But that's not actually what the GOP does. They're not allowing local municipalities to have referendums. They're trying to restrict that so that they can't raise taxes, so that they can't raise school taxes, so that they can't put into place something like their own small sales tax. Well, he talks about this idea of, gee, we're in a free economy, right? Except that they're not allowing those municipalities to do what they need or they want to do. If a municipality puts a tax into place and that causes people to leave, well, welcome to a free economy, right? That's the GOP goal, but instead they're restricting that from happening. And so that's the problem that I have, is that Julian and the GOP, first of all, are anything but fiscally responsible. And they don't have any ideas and they don't have any plans. You watch this entire video, he didn't have any ideas or plans. All he did was say no. And that, I think, is a tragedy, because their sole goal is to keep control exclusively for themselves. And that's not governing. That's not beneficial to you, the citizens of Wisconsin. So that's my goal, is let's put some plans into place. Let's take a look at what we can do to improve our economy. Let's take local control and give it to the municipalities where it's appropriate. And where the state does put limitations and restrictions in, then let's be sure to provide the resources that they need in order to meet those restrictions or requirements. That's not happening from the state GOP, and that is a tragedy. So thank you so very much for watching all of this. I know that it's been a long time working through probably 30, 40 minutes worth of video with me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I and Julian both have to say. Thanks very much.